Welcome to SBA's first cybersecurity summit. We are so excited to be leading on such a critical topic for our small businesses. I'm SBA Administrator Isabella Casillas Guzman, and I'm here today at Microsoft with Brad Smith, the president, one of our great partners at the SBA, because we're going to have a conversation about cybersecurity and small businesses. You're all here to learn and gain some important insights as you look to secure your business against cyber attacks. So excited to be here. You know, this past 2.5 years, we've seen such an uptick in the amount of digital technologies that our small businesses have had to adopt. And so that's why this summit is so important and why your participation is so critical. So that's kind of where we're going with this conversation, Brad. We really want to start to dive in for small businesses who have adopted technologies at such high rates. You know, during the pandemic, as small businesses were struggling to retain revenues, we saw them, adopt e-commerce strategies, more social media strategies to connect with consumers that used to walk in their doors and no longer did. Across the board, trying to improve their operational efficiencies and how they processed orders or planned, even just their HR functions. Everything became technology centered. And so for small businesses, this was oftentimes a new frontier, but the adoption has been exciting because I think it can lead to some great innovation and as well as efficiencies in small businesses and how they operate. But one thing that we've been really thinking about at the SBA, obviously, is with that increased adoption of technical tools, that there's more exposure online for our small businesses. And that's the environment that we see today for our small businesses. And right now, of course, as they're still navigating some of the lingering effects of the pandemic and facing challenges for their businesses, whatever know-how that they can acquire to position themselves for revenue growth opportunities is really what we're trying to lean into. And I don't know if you're seeing similar things in your travels and in talking to small businesses, but it'd be great to get your insights.
Well, I think you captured things really well. I mean, first of all, we fundamentally appreciate that small business is the lifeblood of the American economy, create new jobs. Hopefully, digital technology is not just helping small businesses grow faster, but it's always our ambition, if you will, to make technology an equalizer, to enable a small business to compete with a larger business with the power of technology. And close that gap in terms of the difference between human resources. But I think you're right, because of the pandemic and just because of the developments in cybersecurity more broadly, unfortunately, small businesses are more of a target than they were 5 years ago. In some ways, we've seen the cybersecurity threat landscape become more diverse. We see groups that are typically operating overseas, and they pursue what's called ransomware, or now ransomware as a service. And by that, I mean they'll target an organization, they'll even target a small business. They'll plant malware through a phishing attack, email that's designed to get you to click on something that's not real. It installs code on a computer, and suddenly you have an employee who says, I have something here. And what it says is, if we don't pay money, all of our data is going to be destroyed. And obviously, if all your data is destroyed, it's hard to stay in business. So we're seeing that as a bigger threat than it was before. We've seen some surveys that have reported that as many as a quarter of small businesses have been the targets of these kinds of attacks. Occasionally, we see nation-state attacks that go into different directions that may sweep up small business as well. So what we appreciate, I think, more than anything else is if you're running a small business, you have a lot to worry about. This is one more thing that needs to be added to the list. And our goal needs to be to help people worry less and do more. But the key to worrying less is to do more to protect yourself.
I think that's exactly right, especially because we know, especially our smallest of the small businesses, they wear so many hats already. To add this one that's more complex to the list on top of it just creates more complications for their business. So however we can ease that for them as well and help them better prepare for cyber attacks. I think that also protects us as a nation as well, because our small businesses are a part of our supply chains. They're really key business partners for so many large companies as well. We want to make sure they're protected in addition. Some of what the SBA has been doing to try to help small businesses is increase that awareness, because I think, for so many, it's not top of mind. You're definitely focused on revenues, hiring people, making sure that you can get the supplies, the goods that you need to continue your business. There's so many day-to-day challenges, and so focusing in on cyber has become difficult. So this is our day to really focus on it, and during the summit, and then the whole month of October, of course, is Cybersecurity Awareness Month, and we want to leverage this moment, but also to highlight our resources. So we have trainings across our network of centers that really focus on making sure that you identify where you're potentially at risk, and then come up with some solutions to protect yourself as a business owner. We also, of course, have launched this Small Business Digital Alliance that Microsoft partners with us on, and to point businesses in the direction of digital tools to protect their business. And cyber is one of those critical resources that we have at the Small Business Digital Alliance partnership. And beyond that, obviously, we're trying to incentivize states and other organizations to help small businesses on this front. And we've awarded grants, pilot grants to states around the country to help them figure out how to best protect their small businesses. And so leading with Arkansas and Maryland and South Dakota, we've been able to support small business strategies in those states. So I know that where our efforts to educate and to build awareness are one thing, but there's also great resources and tools that the private sector is trying to provide. That's what the Digital Alliance is about, bringing private, large businesses to come and help smalls. So could you share a little bit more about what Microsoft's doing?
Absolutely. And I would start just by noting that I think that the Small Business Digital Alliance that you've referenced is a real breakthrough, because it's bringing everybody together. Certainly in a company like Microsoft, job one for us, frankly, always has to be to build more security features into our products, turn them on by default so that people are protected without having to go get a PhD in cybersecurity. That is not the goal here. And so we've been investing substantially more in this space, in part based on conversations with officials here in Washington. We do turn on a lot more by default. I think one of the things we always encourage people who run a business, large or small, to do is then go talk to others. We know that most people who run a small business or work at a small business are probably also working with a partner that is advising them and helping them with their IT needs. In all probability, that is also a company that's partnering with, say, Microsoft. And so the number one thing I think somebody can always do is just ask some questions. Am I protected? What have you done to protect me? Is there something that I should have done that I have not? It's like anything in life, the best way to learn is to ask questions. I will say there's a few sort of common sense rules or principles that we encourage people to think about. Keep your software current. We provide updates, we provide patches. These are available free of charge, but make sure your computers are configured so that they're downloaded. That's one of the most important things that people can do to protect themselves. The second is what is known these days as multi-factor authentication. So don't just rely on a password. Do have a password, at least for the products that involve passwords.
And it shouldn't be ABC123.
Exactly. Have a password that's not easy for somebody to predict, but use the second factor of authentication, meaning have it where you have to access it by a phone or some other device that is in your possession. If you keep your software current, use that kind of multi-factor authentication, you're probably going to eliminate 95% of the risks that you would face. And one of the things that we find so often is with companies large and small, if they've been a victim of an attack and really suffered a breach or damage to their IT infrastructure, it typically isn't because they did those two things. The other thing that I would just say is think about the cloud. If everybody's just trying to run their software on their own hardware in their own four walls, it means you've got to do everything to maintain that hardware. Whereas if you move it to the cloud, whether it's Microsoft or one of our competitors, that becomes our problem. It's no longer your problem as the small business owner or operator, and it's what we do. This is fundamentally our core competency. And the good news is the partner network throughout the country, the companies that are in the business of providing IT services and advice, they understand how all of this works. And so if you have the right conversation, start to ask the right questions, I think a plan begins to emerge very quickly.
And we talked about this, but especially our smallest of the small businesses, they're just a few employees. They're less likely to have an IT person who can do all this. So taking those initial steps as a business to set the right configuration, using private partners and leveraging those tools is really important and a good safeguard. If you can protect yourself over 90% from 90% of the all the potential attacks, you're way ahead of the game.
I would say think about this a little bit the way you might think about insurance, because in a way it is insurance. It's protective steps to ensure you're not the victim of a cyber attack. A small business is not likely to have somebody who manages their insurance needs full time. But they have an insurance agent, and the insurance agent works with insurance carriers. And if it's an agent you trust, you know how to have that right conversation. In so many ways, having an IT partner, a local, it's probably a small business as well in many instances, that you have confidence in, start to ask a few questions, and then they know how to look at a Microsoft or a you name it in terms of what we or others can provide, and you just put in place what you need.
And I think on that topic as well, I mean, for cybersecurity, just like natural disasters, preparing for natural disasters, it's the same thing. You got to identify where your risks are and just make sure that you're protected. And with cybersecurity, it's similar easy steps that businesses can take. And we SBA participated in the White House Cybersecurity Summit just to make sure that our small businesses were top of mind, and that everyone is considering protecting small businesses as they're developing. So it's great to hear that large corporations are obviously embedding those automatic defaults to a secure mode to make sure that small businesses have some protection as soon as they start to turn on these tools. So is there any, in terms of the future and what you see some trends happening in the small business space, these businesses, of course, cover multiple industries. It could just be Main Street service. It could be more technology that perhaps is targeted as well. What type of trends for the future are you seeing, and what can small businesses do to keep on top of cybersecurity issues?
I think the good news is that over the last 2 years in particular, there's been an enormous investment in the strengthening of what we would call defensive protection. And just to give you one sense of that in terms of the issues of the world more broadly, we've all been reading in 2022 about the war in Ukraine. The truth is the cyber attacks the Russians have launched against Ukraine have not done much damage. It's not because the Russians haven't been aggressive, but it's because I think the state of defensive protection has really advanced considerably. We as a company really worked very closely with the Ukrainian government and a number of small and large businesses and nonprofit organizations in Ukraine. And what we found is if you turn it on, it will protect you. In fact, it will probably protect you very effectively. But it won't work if you don't turn it on. So if we look at the future trends, first, we have to assume that adversaries will get better. That's what adversaries do. But I do believe that right now, you're going to continue to see more defensive protection, more cybersecurity services built in and offered in ways that are easy to use. But it does, at the end of the day, become a little bit like a seatbelt. The seatbelt is in your car. We know it saves lives. You do have to put it on. I think that's why the awareness factor is so fundamentally important. This is not the hardest problem any longer for a small business to solve, but we cannot do absolutely everything. We can get almost all the way there, but we will all together all depend on sort of talking to each other and then people taking the practical steps to use the protections we create.
Well, a great call to action in and of itself. Turn it on.
Yes.
Well, for SBA's perspective, and we want to make sure small businesses out there are leveraging the tools that the federal government has to offer. SBA's website has content directing to great partners through our Small Business Digital Alliance, and we, want to make sure small businesses just leverage that consistently. So we're completely aligned there. I don't know if there's anything further that you wanted to add in terms of what small businesses should do today to protect themselves from cyber. What's a quick action they can all immediately go home and do?
Well, I would do two things if I were running a small business. First, I would ask the person who works on my team if somebody is there who knows a lot about IT. If not, I would ask our partner, where are we? Just spend 15 minutes. Tell me what we have. Tell me what vulnerabilities we have that we haven't addressed. Let's just talk about what we should be doing. And then second, this is an area where news becomes old quickly. The threats will evolve. Use the resources that the SBA has created, or have somebody use them for you. I think those are two common sense principles that you can apply. I think one of the, I'll say, joys and challenges of running a small business is you really have to think very broadly from left to right. You have to think about and maybe even worry about so many things. I don't think our goal should try to be to ask you to, please, think deeply about cybersecurity. Other people should be able to do that. We should be able to help you do that. But don't forget about it either. Ask about it.
Right. Well, that's a great note to end on. Just small businesses out there, we know the challenges that you're facing in your business, and we don't want cybersecurity or the huge costs involved with an attack or a data breach to be something that you're worried about. So the best thing to do is use our resources. And this has been a great pleasure to talk to you, Brad, and great to learn about all the challenges that we can anticipate, but that there's solutions that are practical behind the scenes.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks for what you're doing.
Wonderful. Thank you.